decision. Recommendation is recommendation.
Can't appeal recommendation. I made that point to him last time.
And we're pointing to that last time.
We'll get him ship-shape eventually. Good evening. By AT&T cell system, it's 7 o'clock. I'd like to call this meeting to order and start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Stand if you could. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. First item is review and adopt the agenda. I would also like to add to the agenda seating of alternates, if that's okay. What I'd like to propose to the board is that we seat alternates 10 minutes before the meeting begins. So if we have a regular member who's not here at 6:50, the alternate is seated. And we would seat alternates in the order of which they attend. So if two alternates come in, the first one in gets seated. Is that from a sense of the board, is that acceptable to everybody? I think it's a fair thing. That way there's an incentive for alternates to come and be seated if we need them.
Agreed.
I guess we could take a motion on that.
Okay.
So I'd like to make a motion that we seat alternates 10 minutes before, which is 6:50, and the alternates would be seated in order of attendance. So whoever shows up first gets seated first. I'd like a second.
I'll second.
All right. Mr. Sumner seconds it. Let's take a vote. Mr. Gentry?
Aye.
Mr. Sumner?
Aye.
I vote aye. Mr. Stevenson?
Aye.
And Mr. Green?
Aye.
All right, and that's what we'll do at this point. All right, review and adopt the rest of the agenda. May I have a motion and a second?
I'll motion to adopt the agenda.
And a second?
I'll second.
All right, Mr. Sumner makes a motion to adopt the agenda, and Mr. Gentry seconds it. All in favor? Opposed? No. Next item, approval of minutes. Any changes or corrections?
I'll make a motion to approve.
As written?
Yes, sir.
Second? Somebody?
I'll second it.
All right, thank you, Mr. Gentry. Mr. Sumner makes a motion, Mr. Gentry seconds it. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It passing. Public hearing, rezoning case number 23-03-PLBD-00041. Would you present this to us, please?
I will. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this property is located at 7884 ZZ Eversfield Road. The request is to rezone from AG Agricultural to RS 30, and that's a single-family residential district. This property is located on the east side of Eversfield Road, approximately 615 feet south of Lambert Lake Road's intersection. And the tax parcel is 150412. This property contains 22.65 acres. And in this case, the planning board will make a recommendation to the town council, which would have final authority to either approve or deny the request. And the applicants, upon any major development of this property, intend to and would be required to, under ordinance, connect to Stokesdale's water system. And keep in mind that this request is for any and all uses permitted in the RS 30 zoning district, and this is not a request or consideration to develop or to subdivide the property at this time. There is no history of denied cases. And the general character of this area, the existing land use, it's vacant, partially wooded, and there are some small outbuildings on the site. Surrounding land uses, to the north and south, you've got agricultural as well as a mixture of single-family residential uses. To the east and to the west, you also have single-family and low and medium-density residential. There are no historic landmarks on or adjacent to the subject property, and there's no known cemeteries on the property. This would be served by Stokesdale Fire System. Once again, it would, if developed, it would have private septic systems and Stokesdale water. Eversfield Road is a local residential DOT street. It would be subject to any DOT driveway permits, and a traffic study could be required based on the overall size of any proposed subdivision. And this property would not appear to be impacted by the proposed US 158 improvement project listed in NCDOT STIP project R-2577C. And the NCDOT annual average daily traffic figures taken in 2021 were measured to be approximately 2,100 for Eversfield Road. As far as proposed traffic generation, that is not available at this time because there is no plan to develop at this time. And as far as school impacts, they are expected to be minor upon any development of this property. Existing topography is gently to moderately sloping. There's no regulated floodplain on the property as well as no wetlands on this property. However, there are 2 map streams on the property, and this property is not located in a designated water supply watershed. Per the Stokesdale future land use plan, the plan recommendation is for residential, and this requested action, if approved, would be consistent with the recommendation of the future land use plan. Thus, the action, if approved, would not require an amendment to that plan. Staff is recommending approval of the request. If approved, this proposed rezoning action would be consistent with the recommendation of the future land use plan for residential and would be reasonable and in the public interest because it is adjacent to similarly zoned residential uses in this area and would provide low-density housing opportunities for citizens, and it's in areas served by Stokesdale Municipal Water. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Mr. Snyder? Mr. Snyder, would you, just as a addendum or whatever, read what are the permitted uses in an RS30 district?
So if I had my ordinance book with me, which I don't, I would do
I'm
that.
sorry. I should've-
So go under zoning, Article 4, yep. Good permitted uses, 4-3. Thankfully, Mr. Winfrey has his cool little gadget here, so we'll get there in just a second for you. All right, so, yeah, permitted uses. All right, so those would be agricultural production of crops, agricultural production for livestock with development standards, forestry, RS30. Common recreation and service facilities, family care facilities, this is not an overlay, so those wouldn't apply. Single-family detached dwellings, major subdivision residential, minor subdivision residential. That's one of the key qualifiers from it being zone AG versus RS30. It does allow a major subdivision. Accessory dwelling units would be permitted with development standards. Accessory uses are permitted. Emergency shelters, customary home occupations with development standards, junk motor vehicles with development standards, satellite dishes, it shouldn't be a use, but it's in there, development standards, swimming pool with development standards, yard sales. Then there's several items with special use permits, athletic fields, clubs or lodges, country clubs with golf courses, public park with development standards, public recreation facility with development standards, swim and tennis club with special use permit, cemetery or mausoleum with development standards, church with development standards, daycare for adults with 5 or fewer as a home occupation with development standards, child daycare 5 or fewer as a home occupation with development standards, elementary or secondary school with development standards, a fire station, a police station. That's going to be most of the uses right there. Bed and breakfast with special use permit. I will say it's much more restrictive than the AG zoning, which is a pretty wide open residential zoning district. Beneficial fill area development standards, construction or demolition debris minor with development standards, rural preservation development with special use permit, utility lines, utility substation development standards. A lot of overlap between these uses and what's allowed in the AG, but there's of course some major differences. Automotive parking, temporary construction offices, that's it.
As well as a pig farm.
Uh,
Agricultural use with stock?
So livestock is that's one of the very first ones,
Yeah.
subject to, I believe, development standards. And livestock are also regulated under state DEQ requirements, especially hog, depending on how many for their waste facilities and other things. So you get into a whole bunch of regulatory requirements when you get into
I've
pig
not
farms.
known Mr. Greco to be involved in a hog
He is
farm
not a
yet.
pig farmer that I'm aware of, but
Okay. Any other questions? I'd like to take our comments. I guess I can take comments from the public. There's a Mr. William Fortuno. Would you like to speak about this?
do we want to let the applicant speak first? to
Oh, well, I'm
introduce our
sorry.
application?
Yeah. Mr. Greco, I'm sorry about that. Mr. Pig Farmer.
Fine, Harry.
Bill Greco with Land Solutions. My address is P.O. Box 347 in Oak Ridge. Mr. Chair, members of the board, I'm here this evening to speak on behalf of the applicant in favor of this application. First of all, certainly like to thank our planner and staff for putting together a report, very thorough, very detailed, and very accurate. I'd also like to thank Town Hall. Part of our efforts prior to arriving here this evening, we sent out a mailing to immediately adjacent property owners and were able to rent this facility this week and have an open house. Had a few folks in attendance, went well, and I actually learned from some of our neighbors. I closed a part of Suffield Road some years ago, and I'd forgotten about it. The tax maps doesn't reflect it, so it was a good thing, all in all. Also, as a result of our outreach, I've received a couple phone calls, a couple emails, mostly with just general questions. What are you planning to do? What's going on? So all in all, we feel like we've done our best to reach out and listen to folks' concerns. A little bit about this property owner. AFC is the initials for the lady that owns the company. This is a family-run business located northwest Greensboro, been clients of ours for some number of years, and they are just outstanding clients. I wish I had more like them. Great people. They're in the home building business. If you're familiar with the site, there's 2 or 3 new homes right there on Eversfield Road near the public notice sign. That's their work. That's who they are and what they do. I don't really want to go back through the staff report too much, but I would like to highlight just a few things on our decision-making process and where we stand from a design standpoint. Our intent is to build a single-family residential subdivision. We've completed all of our soil analysis. We do have good soil there to use. As you heard in the staff report, there's really nothing remarkable about this property in terms of historical or wetlands or watershed or anything of that nature. It's a fairly vanilla piece here. When we're looking at districts, certainly the size of the parcel, the shape of the parcel, connectivity to adjacent parcels, there's a lot of factors that go into play. Each district has requirements for lot sizes, whether that be width or square footage. And as we evaluated all this, RS-30 was the clear front runner in our mind for creating a design that's cohesive, well put together, and efficient for this property. In terms of use, which is really, what a zoning question is all about, essentially we're surrounded by residential. We've got RS 40 on one side, we've got some other versions of RS 40, we've got a PDR directly across Eversfield, and we do have some RS 30 adjacent to us just on the other side of Suffield Road. As our planner has mentioned, the current AG district certainly does have a lot more uses available, which we will be removing. Some of those, should this be approved, some of those that come to mind, shooting range, dog kennels, things of these nature. I wouldn't make the point that they're inappropriate in AG, but I think when you're surrounded by residential, some of the currently allowed uses, I think some folks would find those less suitable than single-family housing. So that's where we feel like we're at on use. In terms of reasonableness, again, I think the town of Stokesdale stands to benefit from continuing to develop in a thoughtful manner in conformity with the land use plan and provide these different single-family residential housing options, both for current and future residents. With all that said, if I missed anything, let me know. I'm happy to answer and address any questions you may have.
Questions from the board? Thank you, Mr. Greco. Now, Mr. Fortuno, if you would come up and tell us your address to read it in the record, please.
My name is William Fortunato. My address is 7093 Lambert Lake Road in Stokesdale. I'm an adjacent landowner. I had the opportunity to speak with Mr. Greco at the open house, and I am generally in favor of the plan proposal. He has presented a well-formed neighborhood that will conform with the current neighborhoods that surround it, both in style and how it will impact. It doesn't sound like anyone's house is going to be put on top of anyone else's property line, so you'll have a radical change in the adjacent houses. The position of the outflow road from the proposed development sounds to be reasonable in my perspective. It's not going to impact negatively the outflow from Lambert Lake and the neighborhoods therein. It's spaced far enough away that the traffic isn't going to be colliding with itself. It's also spaced far enough away from the curves and the dips on Eversfield that it should not be a danger to the drivers on that road. My one question for the board, however, because this is an additional development, and it does not sound as though it's going to be the last development off of Eversfield, when will Eversfield future traffic studies be conducted, and what are some of the traffic control measures to help improve this road going forward? It is my opinion that taking these improvements sooner rather than later will have a longer-term benefit for the current residents and lesser impact on the future residents who will no longer have to be diverted for road construction, road widening, the installation of traffic control devices, or the like. That is all I have to say. Thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to your responses.
I think I can answer that most of the traffic, or all of your traffic questions, depend on the NCDOT. Am I right there?
You are correct. And one of the things I mentioned in my staff report is that there may be a traffic study required for this property. Generally speaking, it extends out, maybe a couple hundred feet, or sometimes it goes even to the traffic signals for signalization purposes. And then DOT uses those to decide which improvements, if any, are warranted at the entrance to the subdivision. So if turn lanes or deceleration, acceleration lanes, things like that would be required, or if, realignments necessary, that would come up during that study process. And DOT is also one of the reviewers that takes part in the technical review committee, which would review any subdivision development that would take place on this property. But as far as the bigger question of Eversfield Road, like Mr. Chairman said, probably a good call to DOT, just to get on their radar if it's not already. They typically go through different study lists, but notoriously DOT is reactionary. They are not proactive, so just keep that in mind. So when it gets to like a level of service C, D, F, that's about when they'll start to do something. So It's a blood on the pavement sort of thing, unfortunately.
Thank you. Any other questions? Well, since we're a few here, anybody else want to talk? All right.
Mr. Chairman, I think I should add, in response to the comments, especially Mr. Fortunato made, he made comments about the style, location of the houses, location of the roads, et cetera. That's not before the board. In other words, your issue is this a good use or bad use of this property? These other ideas of the site plan, that's not before the board tonight. So I just want to caution the board against any information about the location of homes or style of homes or anything else. That's not really before the board tonight.
Okay. Our job is a recommendation to the town council whether we should rezone this or not. I will entertain a motion from somebody.
I'll make a motion to make a recommendation to town council for approval.
If I could, we need to close the public hearing also, please.
Oh, all right. We're going to close the public hearing.
Thank you.
We've done that.
I'd like to make a motion to recommend approval to the Stokesdale Town Council.
A second?
I'll second it.
Mr. Sumner has made a motion. Mr. Gentry has seconded. Let's take a vote. Mr. Gentry?
Aye.
Mr. Sumner?
Aye.
Mr. Stevenson?
Aye.
Mr. Green?
Aye.
And I also vote aye.
And I would just say, it would be a good idea to adopt the statement of reasonableness and consistency that's in the staff report as part of your motion, if you would.
Yeah.
Would you amend your motion to say that?
Still on.
Yeah, can I read it? I'd like to, as that recommendation, adopt the statement of reasonableness and consistency that the staff recommended.
His motion is so amended. Any objections? We'll let it go then. So, I think announcements. Let's see. The planning board is not a final decision in this case. The planning board either recommends approval or denial, so which is what we have. No approval or recommendation is necessary, and no filing fee needs to be paid for the matter to be heard by the Stokesdale Town Council. Am I right on that? We've discussed this?
That's correct.
Okay. The next Stokesdale Town Council meeting will be on Thursday, May 11th at 7 p.m. The next Stokesdale Planning Board meeting will be on Thursday, May 25th at 7 p.m. Is there a motion to adjourn?
May I offer one thing? I'm sorry, I should have mentioned this earlier, but I just want to give an update on the Guilford County comprehensive planning process. We are going through the comprehensive plan update. It does affect Stokesdale because you are Guilford County residents. We had our first public workshop at the Ag Building this past Tuesday. There will be other public workshops, so if you would, or if you're so inclined, visit Guilford County's webpage, and there's a link to the comprehensive plan, which has its own page, and that gives you updates. You can also request to be added to our email list, and we will basically blast out various emails. You might get more than you bargained for if you do that, but you'll at least get the emails from the comprehensive plan. We do anticipate the next public workshop probably midsummer, maybe July-ish. I expect it's probably gonna be in Pleasant Garden, because they're doing a 421 corridor study relative to the mega site in Randolph County. So we felt that that's probably the most appropriate time and place to capture some of those folks. And then the third one is to be determined. It might be Eastern County, it might be North. We may add a fourth one, we don't know yet. But we just want everybody to be aware, be involved, ask questions if you have questions. Email address is compplan@guilfordcountync.gov for the record, so.
Does this affect roads in this area?
It affects every single part of planning and economic development in Guilford County. So it will basically inform the decisions moving forward relative to land use, relative to development patterns. We use demographic information. We basically have a panel of experts that are involved in this process. We'll look at environmental assessments, agricultural preservation. It pretty much runs the gamut. So please, if you're willing, if you're able to participate in the process, there's a survey online we'd love for you to take as well. So
Thank you.
thank you.
Let's get back to it. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right, Mr. Stevenson has made a motion. We have a second?
I'll second it.
Mr. Gentry seconds it. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Let's close. Thank you, folks. Ooh, that's not too bad. 25 minutes.
You're used